Let me welcome all the participants that are here and the delegates that are here who have attended all our leadership dialogues for many, many years. Actually, quite a number of them in the last 2.5 years. So welcome again. Thank you for coming. Our leadership dialogues I highlight on the WBS calendar serve as an important purpose, which is to help the school fulfill its mission. Our mission is clear, is to play a key part in engaging in impactful public discourse. By having robust dialogues with this country's eminent leaders, we can, as a business school, start to address some of the issues our continent is facing. The stumbling blocks that are getting in the way of our social and economic transformation. Everything we do at business school, our research, our teaching, our collaborations and public platforms is about finding real and practical solutions. WBS seeks to have an impact and to develop leaders who are driven to create a positive change. These are always emphasized. It's about impact and it's about really coming up with practical solutions. And these dialogues, I always say when I start them, they're not here for throwing stone and blame shifting, especially as we enter into the silly season of elections. There'll be a lot of that kind of thing. What we're looking for here is positive solutions. Similarly, at the heart of the Industrial Development Corporation is to have a positive impact. It does so through sustainable businesses and supporting entrepreneurs. And I know TP for a long time now. I've seen him doing great work in this space, and therefore increasing job opportunities, improving lives. It also seeks to build inclusive economy, while at the same time building South Africa's industrial capacity, creating globally competitive businesses that will help Africa to realize her potential. That's a critical function of IDC. That's why we're aligned with the vision of IDC. IDC plays an important role and a central role in the future of this continent. The work it does is to actively promote industrialization. And we need it desperately now because we're becoming a country of importers. We import everything now. Having come from an energy industry, it saddens me to know that the fuel industry now we're a net importer. In the past, we had a refining industry that was thriving. So it is my privilege to really welcome the CEO of IDC, Mr. TP Nchocho. In the 4 years, he's really navigated IDC through very difficult and challenging times with COVID in between, but he has done it in a sustainable way. And I must say, we need to give him a round of applause because IDC is one of our state-owned enterprise. Every time we talk about state-owned enterprise, there's just negativity around them. But IDC, there is no negativity, and we thank you for that. But let me hand over to Prof Mills, who will introduce Mr. TP and lead us in this discussion. Over to you, Prof. Prof doesn't need any introduction. He's
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go for it, Prof.
Thank you, Prof Maurice Hadebe, Director and Head of School at WBS Business School. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you here today. My name is Mills Soko, Professor of International Business and Strategy at WBS Business School. I'm also Director of Development and Partnerships, and it is my pleasure to facilitate today's discussion. It's a great honor to welcome today TP Nchocho, CEO of the Industrial Development Corporation, the largest state-owned development finance institution in South Africa. Thanks to all of you again for joining us today. You will have an opportunity to ask questions of our guest. Please use the chat box to write your questions or comments, and I will relay them to TP. In case you miss anything, this event is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel. TP, welcome to WBS Business School, and thank you for accepting our invitation to come here, take time off your very busy schedule to share with us your personal and professional journey.
Thank you very much for welcoming me. Thank you, Prof. Maurice. Thanks, Prof. Mills. I'm really honored, humbled by the invitation. Thank you so much.
Right. The first question I'll ask you, looking at your career trajectory, I realize that you are very, very seasoned development financier. You know, you're currently CEO of the IDC, but you've also had, previously held very senior leadership and executive positions at the Land and Agricultural Development Bank, as well as the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Why did you choose development financing as a career?
I'm not sure if I chose it because for those of us who grew up and studied in the early 90s, late 80s, we went to university. We had an idea that, you know what, I want to be educated. That's point number one. I think many of us said, I want good education. At school, high school, studied natural sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, and those things. And my first year of study actually was BSc in this biology and other physical sciences. But it was during that first year, somehow getting to learn about, what's going on around the world, talking to lecturers, talking to professors, talking to other students, that it dawned on me that, at that time already, talking here 1989, 1990, to say, I think I would be best placed if I have the opportunity to work in commerce. And that was the idea, to work in commerce. And then, so second year, I changed. I dropped BSc and I started a BCom, which I had not studied business and economic sciences in high school. So that's how it started. It was a desire to work in commerce. But in terms of how I got started and why this, if you like, captured my imagination, I attribute it a lot to my early career mentors, teachers. The person who appointed me to my first job at the Provincial Development Corporation out in the Free State was a Mr. Lazarus Zim, very well known.
Yes.
He was my first boss. Very inspirational man. And he, had numerous conversations with all of us. And that's when this seed was planted to say, you know what, development finance is about progressive improvement of the quality of life of people. It's about progressive improvement of quality of life. And how do you do that? You do that through investing in economy, in social programs, and the various other things, Prof, that you know. So that's what captured my imagination. So the early stage teacher, and then another person, of course, the old man, Junior Potloani. Junior was a big executive at South African Breweries at the time, and we aspired to him, and he was the only Black person, very senior at South African Breweries 30 years or so ago. And then Dr. Mokhele, a scientist, an academic. He was on the board of that particular development institution in the Free State, the provincial one, when I was a young man of 23, 24 years old at the time when I started. And the counsel of these wise men, I think, set me off in this direction. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm looking at your academic credentials, TP, you hold a number of very impressive academic qualifications. You mentioned some of them, a BCom degree from the University of the North, Limpopo, a Master of Business Leadership, MBL from UNISA, School of Business, and an MSc in Finance, University of London in the UK, as well as an advanced management program from Harvard University. I mean, that's a very, very formidable combination. How did these academic qualifications, when you look back, prepare for you? When you look back, you say maybe you're not conscious then about how this, but when you look back where you are as a CEO of the IDC, how would you say these qualifications prepared you for the role that you're performing today and those we have performed, in recent years. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mills. Yeah. Having completed a BCom degree and then started working as a young person, 24, 25 years old, you start reading, your eyes open up and you get to understand a little better how the world works and things like that. And it was very clear to me that if I want to make a significant progress in my career, that single degree from a then black university, being called University of the North, the campus in the Free State, or whether from Zululand or those universities which were called black universities at the time. To me, it was clear that that was never going to be enough if I were to be a competitive professional in the world of work. So I then started studying part-time with the University of South Africa at the business school here in Midrand, UNISA School of Business Leadership. At the time, it was a 3-year program, correspondence, and then going to the school for 2 weeks, I think something like 3 years or so in a year, we would come over to Midrand here and receive lectures. And that, it just opened the whole world. You start interacting with people and listening to these professors who have done incredible research work and possess this knowledge. That is why when I completed my final year of MBL studies, I was still living in Bloemfontein at the time. I remember having a conversation with my wife, and not in so many words, we said, if we are to progress, we need to leave Bloemfontein and go to Gauteng. And so a young family, I had 2 young children at the time. We then moved across to Gauteng. This is where I started consolidating my career, really. It was very clear that in Bloemfontein, it was either I was going to work in government, like in a government department per se. Alternatively, there wouldn't be much by way of sort of private sector and high quasi-state institutions like DBSA, which is where I landed. So yeah, that was that. So I then studied the MBL, project management as the core elective that I did. And then immediately after that, I then studied development finance with the School of Economics at the University of London. It was very eye-opening. I was looking for an international, kind of exposure. And it was wonderful. So those 2 degrees formed a foundation for me. I was hoping to combine the themes at some point and do a PhD, but I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit too late now. I'm 55 years old.
No, it's not late. It's not late. You can do your PhD at Advanced Business. Yeah. Now, TP, you were appointed as the IDC CEO on the 1st of January 2019.
Yes.
So that's about 4 years ago. So how have you found the CEO role, since your appointment? And what would you say, the second part of the question, what would you say have been the, your key achievements in terms of your strategic priorities to date?
Yeah.
Firstly, how have you found it? And then secondly, your key achievements. Yeah.
It is, chief executive officer roles are both rewarding and can be very difficult. And so you have to take both when you take on an organization such as the Industrial Development Corporation. It's an organization of more than 80 years of existence, 83 years or so. It has played an incredible role in the creation of major industries, be it the old Iscor, which morphed to the current ArcelorMittal, the steel company, or be it Sasol in its early days, various other companies that have been created with the participation of the IDC. So I was very conscious that I'm taking on a huge task. But remember, I had already spent 11 years or so at the DBSA at a very senior level. I had the opportunity at DBSA when I was an executive there, when one of the CEOs, Mr. Paul Baloy, left. I was asked to be an interim chief executive officer of the development bank. It was for about a year. And then Patrick Dlamini was appointed, and I continued in my executive role. I then subsequently went to the Land Bank for 4 years to be chief executive officer there. And now at the IDC, 4.5 going 5 years as chief executive. So it's been, I'm very privileged. I consider it highly privileged to have been at the top of these three institutions. You know, it has been an absolute privilege for a boy from rural Free State. Yeah. So very difficult, but it is the mission of the institution that captured my imagination. Here is an institution with about 900 or so staff members, highly competent people. Here is this institution with a massive balance sheet and strong financial capabilities. It is entrusted with improving lives at its core, building an economy that generates employment, that generates capital formation in the economy, that generates trade and earnings, both for individuals and businesses, but for the nation as well through the tax systems and things like that. So a very good job. So it has been challenging. My tenure at the IDC, and we can talk about this and I can talk a little bit of detail, was very rudely interrupted by COVID in 2020.
Yeah, we'll come to that.
Because we had our strategic plan, which we laid out in 2019 when I arrived there. But then COVID hit, and we can talk about the details there. So it has been very rewarding, very complicated in terms of managing these unexpected events, the complexity of managing stakeholders, both the markets, because we operate in capital markets, we run borrowing programs, we have investors, but also managing, if you like, this political economic nexus. So very complicated, but rewarding.
But what were your when you took over, you know, the helm of the organization? What were your strategic priorities, and when you look back, do you think we have been able to achieve those?
So there were two strategic objectives, priorities that we set for ourselves. We said, one, we want to expand and deepen the development effectiveness of the IDC. Every development finance institution is always on a quest for wider and deeper impact. And that impact is defined primarily in terms of new capital formation. Are we putting money into businesses that grow and increase the size of the economic pie? From a social and economic perspective. And in the process, do these businesses employ more people, create wealth for their shareholders? And in the process, in the South African context, do they transform and include more Black people in the economic equation and so on? So that is sort of in a nutshell, call it the deepening of the development impact. Then the second pillar of our strategic efforts went in the direction of ensuring the sustainability of the institution, both in financial terms as well as organizational capacity terms, quality of people, resilience of systems, be it policies or control systems and operating systems, but also financially. You have to, even if we are a government-owned institution, remember the IDC has always been, including the DBSA and the Land Bank, are self-funding organizations. So they have a commercial element to the way they should be run. They should be run profitably. They should make profit. They should reinvest such profits in development programs. They should pay their way and not go to the National Treasury with a begging bowl seeking bailouts. And Prof, if you want, I can talk about my experiences at the land bank at some point and my take regarding what I think might have happened there after I left. I'm happy to talk about it.
No. I would invite you to do so because, you have a wealth of experience running development finance institutions. And as, Prof Maurice said earlier, the IDC from outside, we see that it seems to have performed far better than other development finance institutions. So perhaps, you have a very vantage, position to tell us, about comparisons, and the platform is yours.
Yeah. Look, this is how they differ. The Development Bank of Southern Africa is an infrastructure bank. So its primary clients are the big public institutions. So it lends money to the big metros. They offer long-dated loans. It finances the big water boards in the country that build massive water infrastructure around. We also used to lend money to Transnet when I was at the Development Bank. We advanced loans to Eskom at that time as well. So lending to public institutions, but also it has a private sector wing. When I was there, Mandla Gancho was the chief executive. Then before he left, we opened up the private sector window and we lent money. So its balance sheet characteristics are that it has invested in largely infrastructure assets which are very enduring and long dated, ICT, water, energy, and so on. The land bank is a very specialist bank around agriculture, as we know. And its balance sheet is very high risk because it is highly concentrated around one sector. I mean, one of the most common questions I used to receive from the capital markets when I went capital raising was around diversification of the land bank. I said, but how do you diversify a single sector institution? You can only diversify it perhaps at a subsector level, where maybe you invest a lot of money in livestock, in horticulture, in grains, in fruits and what have you, as well as ancillary businesses, perhaps fertilizer supplies and so on and so on. But the overall concentration to the sector will be there. The IDC is an investor in the real economy, in manufacturing, in mining, in tourism, and its balance sheet moves with the economy. When the economy is at 0.3% where it is now, we feel it on our balance sheet because the equities that we hold in large listed investments or private equity holdings, those equities get devalued following the cycles of the economy and so on. So they have very different balance sheet characteristics. And they differ in size, of course. The IDC is the largest at around 180 billion or so, followed by the DBSA, I think it's just over 100 billion. I watched the DBSA grow when I was there for 11 years. I mean, I joined the organization when it was a 20-something billion rand organization. I mean, when I left there, it was somewhere in the order of about 55, 60 billion rand organization. I mean, not that I'm attributing that to myself. And then, of course, the land bank is a smaller one. I think the asset base is just over 45 to 50 billion. So it has been a privilege to have had the opportunity to preside over all of them.
All right. Our conversation with TP Nchocho, the CEO of the Industrial Development Corporation. If you have questions or comments, please type them into the chat box and I will relay them to him. TP, I want to talk about the mandate. I have a very strong interest in how in the history of development finance institutions in South Africa. There's a book written by Hendrik van den Bijl, who was a brilliant scientist appointed by by young smarts in the post-war period. The founder of ESCOM, and he also founded ISCO, and he was very instrumental also in the founding of the IDC. Now, when I look at the mandate, this is an organization that was set up in 1940, state-owned development finance institution, which was mandated to drive South Africa's industrial development and economic growth. But that was during, the apartheid era. How do you think, the mandate of the IDC, the interpretation of the mandate has changed over the years, and how does it find expression, in contemporary South African context? How it has evolved, because these, given the circumstances, changing circumstances, the mandate is still the same, but it's adapted. It has to adapt too.
That's a big question, and I'm sure it's probably a subject of research by your students.
Yes. Yes.
So you're right. It started at that time when industrialization. It was about getting the cheapest possible electricity, expanding the manufacturing sector in order to employ as many white people as possible, building rail systems in order to move bulk commodities to ports, the mines at the time, and so on and so on. So it had a very specific agenda. And that agenda of industrial production has not changed. But what some of the elements of change are the following, is that the IDC, from a spatial perspective, is now challenged that it cannot continue to be an investor and a financier of the main industrial hubs in Gauteng, in the Western Cape, in Durban. So the challenge, how does the IDC execute its mandate of improving livelihoods, including provinces that don't have this momentum of historical industrial locations and industrial conglomerations? Hence, the IDC has expanded its mandate to also include the small and medium-sized enterprise sector. A couple of years ago, my predecessor and I have continued that program of expanding our regional offices, having representation in each province with a mandate to lend and invest. The idea being, yes, we have to cater for whatever business finance is required in Mafikeng or in Mokopane if somebody is creating an enterprise there. We know that there's an ecosystem of other development finance institutions that work in the SME space, and one can say, but are you not duplicating? And that can be a discussion point. But what we are saying is we also have a responsibility. And unfortunately, and this is the truth, some of these institutions have, the provincial ones have not really lived up to their mandate in the most effective of ways. So we cannot just sit and do nothing. So expanding spatial equity, as we call it at the IDC. The second area of change has been addressing the transformation agenda with regards to the inclusion of Black people in the economy. Funding Black economic empowerment. And we can have a long discussion about that. And then the third element of change has been changing the geographic mandate of the IDC, not only to include South Africa, but to include the whole of Sub-Sahara. Because there was recognition that if South Africa as an economy has to grow, and this was espoused a lot by former President Thabo Mbeki, that we are too small an economy in terms of population size. The rest of the African continent is literally at our doorstep. And if we were to build competitive businesses, sell into the rest of the African continent. But for that to happen, we need to assist the continent as well to grow. So rail systems into the DRC, energy projects in Zambia and in Ghana and in Tanzania, I'm talking about the kind of projects that the IDC has done. And so when the rest of the region grows, it gives an opportunity for South Africa to trade itself in and also grow in itself because it is addressing a bigger market. So that is how I think the IDC has evolved over the recent years.
Yes. All right. I have 2 questions. I think 3 questions. One is a comment, which is this is an accolade. Well done, CEO, from Busiso Zola. And then Tsidiso Madua. What is your wish in terms of the direction? Do you have a pen, TP, to take some questions? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what is your wish in terms of the direction that the IDC should take when it comes to its short-term to medium-term strategy? What is your wish from this? So, and then you've got that one?
Yes.
Right. So Anonymous says, what is the IDC doing so well, profitable SOE? Right.
If I got it correct, Prof, because your voice was cut a little bit, what is the IDC doing so well to be a profitable SOE?
So we're to remain the most profitable SOE.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. And the one from, I think Stephanie is Kekana. I would like to know qualify for funding with a newly registered company. What are the criteria?
I lost your voice, Prof.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
So what are the criteria for one to qualify for funding? A newly registered company. I suspect it's funding for to funding businesses and I think you'll understand that.
Yeah. Right. Should I take these questions, Prof?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So my wish for the IDC is the following: is that I wish the entire ecosystem of institutions in South Africa that are crucial to development could work better in synergy. Let me make it practical. I'm sure your students, Prof, might have seen one of the factories, a yogurt milk factory, which relocated out of the Northwest, and they closed the factory. Clover. The reason why Clover closed is because the municipality failed to provide water. The municipality failed to provide electricity, and the road systems in that area were collapsed. Now, an institution such as the IDC can come in, be an investor in Clover or a similar enterprise. But if you have other institutions of the state failing on their respective mandates, it becomes very difficult for the entire system to lift up economic growth. We don't want to do Transnet bashing, but we all appreciate that they are going through a difficult time. On a daily basis, I get statistics from key sectors such as mining. I was in the Western Cape this week. I was looking at the agricultural sector there, the export-oriented sectors, and the difficulties and complications that they have when the country's logistics system is not able to move goods to markets because it is constrained. So I wish the IDC could have this strong and mutually reinforcing ecosystem partners in the national development system. So that's that. But more important, I really wish the IDC continues to be a very attractive organization in terms of attracting the best possible expertise. Yeah. On the question of what is the IDC doing so well to remain a profitable organization, as I mentioned, Prof, maybe I should touch on this.
Yeah.
In 2020, when COVID hit, there were two significant events that impacted the IDC. Firstly, one of our big equity holdings, which is Sasol, ran into serious complications and it lost incredible amount of value. It's a listed entity. Your students can go and have a look as to what happened to the share price of Sasol around January, February, March of 2020. We lost in excess of 20 billion rand as the IDC of that value in Sasol. It has since clawed itself back. We have to give credit to the board and the management team there. The second impact was that because we use IFRS 9 as a standard for accounting, we had to do a forward-looking assessment of our exposures, and we took an additional 9.5 billion rand in impairments, bad debt provisions on our loan book. And that year, we experienced or we registered a net loss of about 2.73 billion rand. This is 2020. We have since had an incredible turnaround to profitability. How do we do it? Look, in as much as we are a development institution, but we have to be very good at evaluating the investments that we invest in. And it doesn't mean that we should evaluate and say no and reject applications. We should be very good at undertaking risk mitigation. So somebody wants to start a factory to manufacture soap or whatever and sell it to the South African retail market. We should ask ourselves, what are the technical risks that they face and how can we help them through advisory and other means to overcome that? What is the market risk that they are facing? Will they be able to sell product at the largest of volumes, at the right margins, and to which segment of the markets? And then engage the entrepreneur in order to enhance the viability of that business. So we have to have an absolute, and we continue to have an absolute focus on the quality of the investments that we make. The third thing that we do is we maintain a very hawkish eye on our cost profile. And our costs, as you can imagine, are made up of our operating costs, the cost of running the organization, which is largely the staff costs, but also the cost of funding, which is made up of the interest rate that we pay on our borrowed capital. So we then have to maintain a very prudent capital structure. Yeah. And then the third thing that we do is that, yes, businesses do fail. So when they run into complications, I always say we are not a trigger-happy organization. So we have a specialized team that then undertakes work out and restructuring. You have to try and work with the entrepreneur, bring the business back to life. And one way is, let's say TP is the entrepreneur. He has raised 300 million rand from the IDC. He runs into problems. What do? Maybe that business can be recapitalized by inviting Mills as a shareholder to buy 40% of that business, introduce new capital, help it into new markets. So we cannot afford to just liquidate a business at slightest provocation. That's not how you run a development finance institution. You have to be patient and try and work them out and nest them back to life so that you maintain the jobs and you can claw back value. But it is about having a good commercial mindset, but at the same time having this mindset of employment creation, building capital formation, upgrading livelihoods. So it's about combining hard-nosed commerce with hard-nosed risk management and a consciousness about the social impact that the organization has. The last one about criteria, well, it's a long one, but if it's a newly created business, we have a unit at the IDC which is called the pre-investment business support. Pre-investment business support. So very often people approach us, they have a business plan, we look through it, you find that the business plan, Prof, is not adequately prepared. You know, the financial model has not been prepared to the right standard. The market research, perhaps that the client has done, we are not very happy, and so on and so on. So we send them to the pre-investment business support team. And that team, at our own cost, will then work with the entrepreneur to try and upgrade the quality of the business plan and do detailed research in order to try and validate the business case. Then, of course, yes, we then have to review its viability in terms of market viability, technical feasibility, production, the technology, the entrepreneur themselves in terms of their commitment and maybe their knowledge of the sector, and so on and so on. Yes. I hope that helps. Right. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very insightful, TP. I want to talk about the relationship, between the main shareholder, the shareholder, and so the state-owned enterprise is one of the challenges in South Africa, but it's not unique to South Africa, if I may say. Yeah, it's not unique to South Africa. Is how you manage the relationship between, on the one hand, the main shareholder, in this case, the South African government, and on the other, the management team, like the executives and the board. How do you manage it? Because sometimes there are conflicts in terms of what you want to achieve. Government has this, you converge on some issues, but you also, there's a lack of convergence on other priorities. And so if you could just share with us from the perspective of the IDC, how you handle that. We look at ESCOM is a very good example of this. And so perhaps maybe what is the governance framework that you use to regulate this relationship, and what are the sort of the tensions if that is allowed, and how do you manage those?
That's a very important question. And I think if I were to start at a point of conclusion, so to speak, is that it is difficult for all institutions. But it is manageable if people are honest and they talk. Difficult but manageable. So all these institutions, including the IDC, the legal prescripts as per the Act are very clear. The minister oversees, he or she appoints the board. The board is responsible for A, B, C, D. The board is responsible for appointing the CEO, who then appoints the executives, and they run the organization. Then how do they run the organization? And this is the first governance instrument. On an annual basis, we produce a corporate plan. It is a legal document that we produce, in terms of which we make commitments to say, in the year ahead, we want to invest so much money, we intend to create so many jobs, we commit to support so many entrepreneurs, we foresee the distribution of our investments being 20% in mining, 30% in manufacturing, 40% in whatever. I'm just using example numbers as an example. So the corporate plan then becomes the governing document against which we are judged. And included in that corporate plan as well is a financial plan. It's a budget that says, in a 3-year intervening period, this is how we see the revenue profile of the organization. This is how we see the budget costs. This is how we see the profitability. This is how we see the cash flows that will be coming from investments. This is how we see the borrowing program. We formally request that in order to support activities of the corporation, we will borrow so much money. So the corporate plan becomes an overarching document that then governs us. And then, of course, we are responsible for the execution of the corporate plan. The board sits as an overseer, and they hold us accountable for performance and what have you. Right. We work, and then things happen. Let's say, for instance, the riots happen, or the floods as they happened the other day. And then there are expectations on the part of government. And I can tell you, as part of the accountability framework, at least once every quarter, we appear before the Parliamentary Committee on Trade and Industry, where we report as to how far we are progressing with regards to the corporate plan. And that is where the nexus between politics and economic management comes, because a lot of expectations are communicated regarding, no, you guys must support Black people, you must support businesses in the township, you're not doing enough, and all that and all that. Now, here is the thing, the way I personally manage this. So there is a formal governance framework, as I've just articulated it. But we need to be conscious that the shareholder representatives, the political leaders of these institutions, be it IDC or Transnet or ESCOM or DBSA, they have a mandate from the public. Yeah, they have a mandate which they have to live up to. And the instruments of implementation are, amongst others, the institutions that we lead. So you can't dismiss the social and political imperatives. Yeah. But it is about, when everything else is said and done, and this is the important part, when there are expectations that we should do certain things, the ultimate test is whether we have done so in a manner that is sound, that is transparent, that is sustainable, and indeed, that does not cause harm to the viability of the IDC. So if we were to take an extreme example, we cannot just wake up and be told that we must build a clothing factory or a steel factory in the middle of Kuruma. And then we go ahead and spend 1 billion rand there and say, no, we want to create jobs. And we cannot just do it because there is a desire for it to be done. We have to go through the feasibility and viability test and the assessment process. And if it can be done, then yes, we do it. But if it cannot be done, the ultimate professional responsibility is with me as the chief executive officer, the executive team, and the board to say, having applied rational and objective tests, this particular investment cannot be done. And that's it. And, and that's why I said it is difficult, but if people talk honestly, then things are manageable. Because very often, the political principles understand, because you take them through the logic of what can be done and what cannot be done. And of course, in that scenario, for me personally, it is very important to know where the red line is. There are certain things which you know, as the head of an organization who has fiduciary responsibilities, that there are certain things that you can never agree to if they come from anywhere. I've been fortunate that I think these three institutions that I've been part of, as DBSA, Land Bank, and IDC, honestly, and I'm speaking absolutely honestly, we haven't been asked to do stupid, inappropriate things and engage in underhanded, corrupt deals and what. No, we haven't been asked to do those kind of things. So, I mean, we know out of the State Capture Commission, the kind of things people have reported that they were asked to do and things like that. We haven't been placed under such kind of pressure. It has been more rational expectations to say, guys, you must do more for small and medium-sized businesses. You must do more to recover those businesses that were impacted by floods in KZN. What are you doing? You must do more in order to recover those businesses that were destroyed in the townships when the riots happened. And so, yes, we then go out of our way, we adjust our credit models, we advance money, we monitor these businesses, and we do the right thing. It was an imperative, as if you like, a socio-political imperative, but also which has a strong economic base to do it. So it's difficult, but it requires that expectations be clear and there should be a sense of honesty in the conversations. And yeah, you don't need a board that works with you. Any chief executive officer cannot survive without the support of a board. Never. There's no chief executive officer who can survive without the support of a board. So, and then you then have a board which has to work very closely with the political principalship in order to lay out expectations, minister, what can be done, what is not possible, how far can we go? You can only stretch the balance sheet of an organization up to a point before you break its back and all that and all that. And I think in all three institutions, despite the pressures and the difficulties and the arguments and the fights and whatever, it has all been in my view, in a rational and a constructive context. Yeah.
Wow, that's very, very insightful. So there's the comment here from Bulelo. Great TP, it's a real pleasure listening to you. And Muzidlamini, so this one, renewable resources versus coal. What informed the insistence on funding renewable resources and abandoning coal?
Yeah,
that is Muzi. What informed that decision? And then there's Anonymous again. I think this is linked to the question about SMEs. And TP, if you can expand on that, because there's a perception that the IDC to SMEs. So you have specific criteria. You don't just fund any SME, right? So need to clarify what exactly, the high impact investments and all those things. So especially in light of the concerns about commercial banks, that commercial banks are not doing enough to support SMEs and to contribute to socio-economic transformation.
Yeah.
What are you doing there? That's the other question.
Yeah. All right. On the one of renewables and coal, obviously the IDC is a large investor in the mining sector, and we are invested across all commodities: coal, platinum, iron ore, manganese, you name it. Yeah. So we have been engaging on a constant basis regarding this particular imperative for climate resilience, climate sustainability.
Yeah.
I think the first thing to observe, Mills, is we derive our cue also from national policy. So we listen to what cabinet and other policy positions of government say. And we know, all of us, that government has made commitments to itself and to global players to say, South Africa will also join the movement of seeking to decarbonize economies and decarbonize societies, given what has been scientifically proven as the adverse effects of carbon emissions and things like that. So that is the one thing. So we have to play our part in assisting, contributing to the country's decarbonization aspirations, the green agenda, and so on. But where does the IDC stand on coal? We have not abandoned coal finance. In fact, as recently as July, this past month, we funded a black group to acquire coal assets. The total transaction is about 1.3 billion rand. We provided the majority of the funding, 650 million rand. Why? Because the policy position that we have taken at the IDC is that for the national interest, we need to produce coal primarily to support our electricity or our power sector needs. So the power stations that Eskom runs still need coal, and they will continue to need coal really, honestly, way into the foreseeable future. So as much as we are driving the decarbonization agenda, it is our considered view at the IDC that you don't just stop coal-fired power abruptly. If you do that, you will destroy livelihoods.
Yeah.
So, so that is why when we talk at the IDC, we say we don't want to fall victim to what we call a false dichotomy of saying, no, you should do one and not do the other, or what. This is a transition process where progressively, yes, over time, the graph for coal-fired power should reduce when the graph for renewable energy power increases. But it is a progression over time. That's our view at the IDC. So we continue to fund coal primarily to ensure that there is enough of that primary fuel, as it is called, to power those stations that we need in order to have a working energy system. So we haven't abandoned coal. So that is that. Now, in the SME space, yes, Prof, this is an important one. We don't operate at the lower end of the spectrum. So in terms of our aspirations, it is our preferred position to do minimum 1 million, preferably 5 million type SME investments, 5 million and above. The regional offices have delegated mandate of up to 20 million rand to invest in small and medium-sized businesses. So that is sort of the spectrum where we operate as the IDC. So if somebody is looking for 100,000 to start I don't know, a small bakery business at the corner somewhere, we wouldn't be able to do it. We would rely on our colleagues in the provincial entities such as the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller or CIFA, Small Enterprise Funding Agency, and so on. But all of them have their challenges, as you know, Mills, these institutes. Yeah, but we try and stay at a certain segment.
Yeah. TP, okay, there's a comment here from Dimakatso Ndlovu, very powerful insights from TP. IDC, the IDC is really in good hands. Thank you both. Let me just take you back. There's another question I wanted to highlight here from Thando Lue to Ngomezu. They're still on energy. And just to expand, we have already stated the IDC's position in this respect, but perhaps you can expand on this within the context of the SADC, the Southern African Development Community. Thando Luetu says there is a deficit of energy in SADC. Are there plans to expand funding in electricity production and not limited to ESCOM and not linear? That's Thando Luetu.
Yeah, yes, this is a very good subject of discussion. Yeah, you see, because, and I know I'm stating the obvious to the audience here. As I said, the IDC is an investor in the real economy, manufacturing, tourism, mining, and so on. But these real economy businesses cannot function without power and logistics, transportation systems, and water. Yeah. So, indeed, especially in the SADC region, but also for the entire continent of Africa, all countries have to increase power generation capacity, all of them. And all of them, I believe, need to play to their strengths. So, as we saw, and it hasn't happened adequately, Zambia has strong hydro capabilities. Zimbabwe, if things were to come right there from environment point of view, it also has strong hydro capabilities and it also has coal capabilities. The DRC has extraordinarily strong hydro capabilities. I mean, hydropower can be built anytime in the DRC. It is these issues, Mills, that you know very well around political stability and various other challenges relating to the sovereign strengths of these governments, whether they can borrow or whether entities can trade in these economies where currencies are fluctuating, Mozambique has gas. So our take at the IDC is that, yes, reduce coal-fired power over time, ramp up renewable energy power as fast as we possibly can, but you cannot ignore gas as a transition resource. So we are looking at gas-fired power projects. We have done one in Ghana. We are looking at some in East Africa. Let's talk about the area that Prof Morris is very, very deeply knowledgeable about, and that is the area of liquid fuels. Oil, petrol, the kind of things that we use for mobility, for automotive. As the Prof observed, Morris, at the beginning, South Africa has lost a substantial part of its refining capacity. But here's the basic question. Do we think South Africa will switch over quickly, like in 5 years' time or even less than 10 years, away from liquid hydrocarbon-fired vehicles to electric vehicles? Or is it our take that that particular transition is going to take time, be it 3 decades or even more? I'm expressing a personal opinion. I don't think the switch over to electric vehicles will happen like this, like in 5-10 years' time. It is going to take time. So we are going to, I believe, continue to see vehicles that are fired by diesel and petrol for a long foreseeable future. And therefore, when you have a refinery project like they have in Angola, we have funded it. When you have an oil project that is happening, which is happening in Tanzania, that traverses from Uganda through Tanzania, we have participated in its funding because we understand, as of today, the African continent is energy deprived. But we shouldn't fall into, I believe, a false dichotomy. It's just a view I have, and we discuss this all the time at the IDC. Let's accept that we are on a transition path, and that transition could be 20 years, 30 years, maybe more. But we embark on an aggressive decarbonization pathway as we possibly can. But we shouldn't plunge people into poverty today through energy deprivation. I know this is a political economics issue,
but it's important. It's very important. There's somebody here, Mr. TP, is doing a fantastic job with the IDC. Please extend your team. We need a strong, honest leadership, especially in our SOEs. Could you please expand on your portfolio, investment portfolio on the African continent? What have you been doing there? You provided funding, but have you done well? What are the challenges and what are the future plans?
Yes, thanks a lot, Mills, for that question. It's a very valid question. The IDC's statutory regulatory dispensation is that it can deploy up to a maximum of 30% of its capital outside South Africa. At this point in time, we are nowhere near that allocation. And what has happened is that the best way to describe our portfolio on the African continent outside South Africa is that it's a mixed bag. We have good projects in Mozambique, in gas, in agriculture, they are working very well. We have good projects in Tanzania, in the agri-space, agro-processing. We have a project which has not worked well in a cement sector in Ethiopia. The energy projects in Zambia are working very well. We had an agricultural investment in Zimbabwe. It did not work well. All sorts of complications, but which were more currency exchange issues. I mean, the underlying business was making money, but to convert it to dollars and payers was like a nightmare with all that is happening there. And your students would know this very well, Prof. And then we haven't done a lot of work in Namibia and Angola. We are just beginning to get in there. We have not moved aggressively into the DRC. We have, I think, about 3 investments in the DRC, and they are working well. It's mining investments. We chose and we partnered with very good operators on the ground, and they are able to mine the ore body, overcome the logistics challenges, and still are able to transport the product through the ports out in Dar es Salaam. We didn't have good experience in Mali. We did some transaction there. We have since written it off. We didn't have a good experience in Nigeria. There are 2 projects in Ghana that are working very well in the energy space and gas. There's 1 hotel project in Ghana which is not working very well. There's a hotel project in Uganda which is not working very well. It's an absolute nightmare. So it has been a mixed bag. So what happened when I arrived in 2019? We then reviewed this strategic framework and we said, guys, you know what? Let's rather do it this way. Let's say SADC is our primary market because it is close by. East Africa is preferable because it's about 3.5, 4 hours drive. We can get to our customers easily. Therefore, we'll pursue it aggressively. But as far as West Africa is concerned, we said, let's rather operate more on an opportunistic basis. Yeah. If somebody invites us to a deal, one of the major banks, and we just participate as a minority financier, we would look at that. But the more proactive ones is our home base in South Africa, the SADC area, as well as East Africa. So and then of course we are interrupted by COVID, but we are beginning to launch our coverage and origination efforts into these African regions.
Yeah. All right. TP, I want to move on to transformation. I read there somewhere, you know, when you're still the CEO of the Land Bank, a very, very vocal exponent of transformation.
Yes.
And we're very critical of the slow pace of transformation in the agricultural sector.
Correct.
Right? You know, broadly speaking, how would you describe the stage of transformation in South Africa? Social and economic transformation today, and what role has the IDC played in contributing towards transformation?
Yeah, gosh, it's a big subject. So just briefly touch on what I tried to do at the Land Bank. When I arrived there, and to be honest, I don't think I succeeded to any large extent. I mean, I was there for 4 years, so you can't do a lot in that. What was clear was that the Land Bank was still predominantly a financier of white-owned agriculture. And that is helpful because good businesses, they pay well, and therefore, you know, you don't have a problem, at least not in a big way, with your underlying debt book. But we needed to pursue the transformation agenda. And the way we framed the strategy was this, that we said, how about we follow a joint venture type model? And let me make an example. And this is a real, we did it in the citrus space and the grapes in the Western Cape, where a big, large commercial farmer who owns 5,000 hectares of land, we agree and say, you shall alienate out of that 5,000 hectares, let's take out 2,000 hectares of that land holding, put it into a special purpose vehicle. This new co will be 70% owned by a Black person who's your JV partner, and the Land Bank would fund that person. Yeah. And you remain as a 30% shareholder, also invested, and we combine the two of you in order that they can latch onto the technical capabilities of an established farmer. They can latch onto their marketing and distribution system, which is already well established, and leverage like that. So we were trying to de-risk transformation by driving a massive JV type program, and it worked. But at the time when I left, there was a need to start scaling up. Instead of doing about 5 or 6 of these things in a year, you need to do 15 of them to be impactful in that way. At the IDC, again, our primary instrument of intervention is by lending or financing. And so people may not be aware, we actually produced a report, but it was an internally generated report, which I commissioned in 2019, late after I arrived, to say, what has the IDC done over the past 10 years? And it's incredible the amount of money that the IDC has put into transformation. I mean, as at 2021, when we did that report, of the total close to 70 billion or so of lending that had been made or financing that had been made, in excess of 40 billion had actually gone to businesses that in one way or the other have Black ownership, either wholly owned Black or majority owned or maybe minority owned, and so on and so on. The finer details are there. We can share them, Mills, if that will assist your students in their studies. So a lot of financing, but here is where we have fallen short. It has helped a couple of entrepreneurs. I think where the transformation agenda, and I'm just putting myself out there now to say, surely the vision should have been to uplift Black people in large masses.
Yeah.
If this transformation thing was lived up to its true spirit, it cannot be an upliftment of 200 entrepreneurs and they become multi-millionaires. It's not enough. So where I think transformation has fallen hopelessly short is in the upliftment of masses, large numbers of Black people being lifted to also benefit in economic transactions and economic growth and economic value. And so which I think goes back to the small business agenda. And I really don't think as a nation, all institutions, including the IDC, I don't think we have gotten it right in terms of advancing small businesses so that there's mass upliftment, large number of people benefiting from economic intervention. So that is my take. So one of the things that I think, Mills, your students might want to look at is why? Why is that so? Why is it that despite 40 billion that the IDC has invested, so much that the Land Bank has invested, so much that government itself has invested either in land reform or other procurement processes, why is it that there hasn't been large-scale mass upliftment of Black people? Why? Could it be that this very noble initiative, this noble cause of Black economic empowerment has had unintended consequences? Is it possible? I don't know. So perhaps your students could look into this, because 30 years after we gained independence, surely we must think about this. Why is it that such a substantial number of Black people are still the underclass? It has to be answered. It has to be tackled, this particular question.
All right.
So yeah, money has gone in. A couple of people have really made it, but the cake has not been shared wide enough.
All right, TP, What kind of a leader are you? How would you describe your leadership approach? Yeah. I see you're very popular. I'm looking here, everybody's saying wonderful things about you.
Well, thank you very much to the colleagues who are expressing the kind words and the confidence. I think as a Black person, I can say here that I very much appreciate that. I mean, I'm not a fan of destroying Black talent, yeah? A lot of Black executives in this country, sadly to say, in the public sector, in the government sector, be it DGs and CEOs of state-owned enterprises, have been destroyed. And I'm not a fan of destroying Black talent. I'm not. So I'm very grateful for the positive words. Look, what I've learned over the years that I've been working in leadership roles is that one, there's a need to be clear in terms of what do we need to do as a collective. In this organization, what exactly are we all aiming for? Clearly articulated, simple to relate to, and let everybody commit to the mission and the objectives. That's point number one. So I try and converse a lot regarding why, the purpose of our existence and why we are here. The second thing that I think is important is you cannot intimidate people to higher levels of performance. You can only encourage them and hold them accountable. So I'm the kind of person who encourages people a lot and spur them on and encourage them to do more. Even if people fall short, the correction should be the one that builds confidence. I read a submission, I draw on my more than 30 years of experience and say, you know what, you got it wrong here. Your analysis was not right. You should have looked at it this way and this way and this way and this way, so that the person has the opportunity to do better next time. What doesn't help, and I don't do, is to castigate people and cut them into pieces and destroy their confidence. It does not help. So if you truly want to build institutions, you have to build the confidence. One thing that I learned a long time ago, and with those early mentors that I had mentioned earlier on, Khotso Mokhele and Lazarus Zeb, is that no human being can operate above their level of confidence. No person can operate beyond their level of confidence. So you want the best of people, lift their confidence level. Keep lifting their confidence level, and the best of them will come through. So that is why we have been investing a lot in cultural transformation at the IDC. And it is predicated on, one, being supportive and ensuring that the best version of professionals at the IDC show up. They show up the best versions of themselves. Secondly, is predicated on building synergies between units and divisions inside the IDC. We all know you can hardly do anything alone and say, I've done my part from point A to point B. And then you say, I'm done. No, you can't be. There has to be continuity. There has to be synergy such that the entire task is completed. You know, and the last, the third element of this culture transformation that we are driving at the IDC is a service ethos. I remember my first speech when I arrived at the IDC. In the big hall there at the IDC, there were like 900 people in the hall. I said to them, let us remember this, that what I call our ultimate bosses, the ultimate boss is not the CEO, is not the board, is not the minister. The ultimate boss are the clients that we serve. Because if they walk, the IDC will become a shell. It will become nothing without the customer base that we serve. So a service ethos we're driving and driving. So this is what I try to do, is to instill confidence and be approachable. I remember when I was at the Land Bank, you know, I hang around and we spend social time with people. And this other chap who has been at the Land Bank for a long time says to me, you know, this is very unusual. And he mentions the name of one of the predecessor CEOs a long time ago. Says, you know, when he walked into a lift, we were required to walk out. You know, like, let's say he's on the 3rd floor and then he gets into a lift. Everybody who's in the lift must get out. The CEO is in the lift. They must get out. I said, you must be joking. He said, no, I'm not joking. You cannot create a sustainable and a viable and a vibrant institution by fear-mongering. No.
Yeah.
People will work, but they will only give a minimum of themselves.
Yeah.
But if you truly want them to give the best of themselves, it's about encouragement, it's about spurring on, it's about supporting, advising, being a source of counsel, using your many years of experience to guide the young ones to do better and become stronger professionals as they grow.
Yeah. TP, I want to ask a follow-up question on that. You know, you did the MBL, Master of Business Leadership.
Yes.
At UNISA. This is a business school where we are. We're having this conversation. You could have chosen to pursue a corporate career. Chosen to go into business, but you chose to become a public servant. And you've been a fantastic public servant. Would you today recommend, and this is a question I've been asked by many students in the business school in the past, you know, that do you think a government career is worthwhile?
Yeah.
Do you think I would be accepted there? Do you think I would be accepted? Do you think I would thrive?
Let me relate Let me relate an episode. When I was at the DBSA, one of my areas of responsibility, as I mentioned, was public sector lending. So we used to lend a lot to municipalities, water boards, and these institutions. One of the big metros, we were working on a loan for them. And I was the executive there. And one of the things that we needed to address was that they did not have a CFO. And we made a condition to the loan that, no, we're not going to advance this loan until you have a chief financial officer, because we want to ensure proper financial management and so on. Long story short, they found a candidate through a research agency. The guy was a CFO of a listed entity. And he asked them a question to say, why would I go and work for a metropolitan municipality and be subjected to political interference with this and this and this and this and this and this? Why? Tell me why. And that question could not be answered in a meaningful way. So my take is the following. I believe there are institutions in South Africa that are very attractive, and the IDC is one of them. It is a premium organization. Anybody can spend 4, 5, 6 years of their life there as a young professional. When they come out of there, they can go to the World Bank, they can go to the International Monetary Fund, they can go to the IFC, they can move across to another private sector bank, and so on and so on. So yes, I would encourage people, do your homework. I'm not saying all public sector institutions are comparable to the IDC, to the DBSA, but do your homework. I believe there are those institutions that you may not want to stay for as long as I have in the environment, but you will never regret the quality of experience that you will gain, particularly if you're a young professional. I have seen guys move out of the IDC and go to all the banks, all of them, and become very, very significant players. I've seen guys move out of the IDC to go into private equity and manage large investment funds and create wealth both for themselves and the owners of capital that they manage, and so on and so on. But yeah, let's be honest. My attraction is to the quasi-semi-state sector. In other words, these DFIs and so on. Look, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but at the moment, it is difficult to make a proposition to say someone should go and be a municipal manager. I mean, the politics of local government is public information. That system has collapsed completely, the public sector, the municipal sector system. So it's very difficult to, I wouldn't encourage my child to take up a position as a municipal official or something like that. I'm being absolutely frank, until we achieve some measure of governance stability in those institutions.
All right, TP, we've got 5 minutes to go. I told you that it will move quicker than you think, right? I told you.
You were right. Eh? Yeah.
All right, 5 minutes. So very quickly within these 5 minutes, you know, the most rewarding moments in your career, number one.
The most what?
Rewarding. What has been the most
rewarding? Yeah,
the most rewarding. And secondly, that's the last question. You are leaving the IDC at the end of this year. What are the future plans?
Okay. Look, for me, the rewarding moments, I would say this, have been when I saw some of the colleagues that came and worked for me in my team, when I saw them go off on their own and become significant leaders on their own right. Yeah. Maybe it wouldn't be appropriate to mention names, but I know in the executive team, for instance, at DBSA, there's at least one person who I recruited when I was there. He was working out in Washington for the International Finance Corporation, came out here as a young person. He now occupies a group executive position at the DBSA. A couple of people I recruited and worked with when I was at the Land Bank. They have since left. One is the chief investment officer of a significant private equity holding. So when that happens, and I'm not attributing the entire thing to myself, but I think in a small way, I hope that this encouraging of people, giving exposure, building confidence, has contributed to the development, the growth of these individuals who are now significant leaders in their own right. So that gives me absolute joy. The other thing that gives me joy in the development finance work is that the work that we do is very tangible, because it's either greenfield type projects that we do or expansion type projects. So you can physically see a new factory being built, a new mining shaft being sunk, a new power station or a new independent power producer project being built. One of the happiest moments when I was still at the development bank was going to water project and seeing things happen, pipes being opened and water flowing. And you know that not only attributable to you, but you were part of a team that put it all together. And here it is today coming to realization. So those are the things that really give me a lot of pleasure. But look, I don't intend to do anything special. Just, there are a couple of things that are on my mind and are on the horizon. One, I intend to serve as a non-executive director on a couple of boards. That's the one thing. I already serve on one of few. Two, I'm going to pursue my interest in doing private investments, making private investments in my own personal capacity, now that I don't have, or I will not have massive conflicts of interest and so on and so on. Thirdly, I'm toying around with the idea of writing a book. My wife has asked me to consider writing a book. So I'm making notes at the moment. Yeah. Then the fourth thing that I hope I can do at some point, although I don't think I'm qualified and I'll be able to pursue a purely heavy academic career, I'm hoping that I would have the opportunity at some stage to teach, either at, at whatever institutions, really not as a full-time academic. I don't think I'll be able to. Yeah. Then, of course, just a lot of leisure travel really with my wife, and then re-engage my golf. I've lost track. So I need to re-engage my golf.
All right. Okay, TP, that's how we come to the end of this afternoon's conversation with our guest, TP Nchocho, CEO, Industrial Development Corporation. TP, thank you for sharing with us. Very inspirational discussion we had here, and thanks for your leadership and service to our country. I'd like to thank everyone in the audience who attended and participated in this event. I would like to thank in particular my colleagues at WBS and the IDC who have worked behind the scenes to make this event a reality, from Vets Business School, Jayton Carson, Alison Gaylord, Tembele Hlachwayo, and Rihandu Makama. And from the IDC, Tsepo Ramodibe, Sisambuli, and Gerald Timonensayana. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and that's how we end.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, colleagues.
Much Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
See you sometime soon.
Okay. All right. Okay.